But today I'm going to talk about creating new paradigms and managing biodiversity and ecosystem functioning on agricultural lands in Greene County. So my dad and I have been farming for 3 years. Dad's been for a lot longer than that, but I've returned to the farm for the last 3 years and trying to pursue this. I see a lot of opportunity and promise in this, and so I want to pass that along to you. But one of the biggest things that I see is I am really eager about this, and I seek out this information, and I think it's because of maybe the paradigm that I'm in. And so I want to talk about, from having inside my paradigm, what I'm seeing in as being more of the conventional paradigm and comparing those. So by comparing paradigms, I'm going to really talk about the ways that we talk. And so I'm going to use a lot of quotes today during my presentation by some of my favorite authors, some of the role models in my life, and use those to highlight some of the things I'm feeling. So this one's by my favorite author, Derek Jensen. The stories we are told shape the way we see the world, which shapes the way we experience the world. And this is so foundational to the way that we view ourselves and our relationship to others and the land base that we live on. If we are telling stories that we are separate from the land or that we do not depend on the land, then we are going to believe that and we're going to act that way. But if we're telling each other and speaking that way and thinking the opposite way, we're going to have the exact opposite reaction. And we're going to be thinking about how we are connected to the land. So I'm going to use some other quotes by some of my favorite role models. Anyone know these guys up here?
Aldo.
Yeah, close. So Aldo Leopold and then Wendell Berry, huge role models for me. And I think you've noticed I'm still pretty young, so I'm still very influential, and these guys are influencing me a lot.
Oh yeah, it's Jacob's birthday.
What's that?
It's his birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing more I'd want to do, seriously, than hear this stuff. I'm serious. So I'll start you off with another quote, and it's by Aldo Leopold, and his articles, Lessons from the Mountain, or one very similar to that. So, we reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in her eyes. I realized then and have known ever since that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I was young then and full of trigger itch. I thought that because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. I now suspect that just as a deer herd lives in mortal fear of its wolves, so does the mountain live in mortal fear of its deer. And perhaps with better cause, for while a buck pulled down by wolves can be replaced in 2 or 3 years, a range pulled down by too many deer may fail of replacement in as many decades. So also with cows. The cowman who cleans his range of wolves does not realize that he is taking over the wolf's job of trimming the herd to fit the range. He has not learned to think like a mountain. Hence, we have dust bowls and rivers washing the future into the sea. I read this passage probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it is the most important passage I've ever encountered. Literally changed the way that my life was going at that time, and it was actually out of this country when I was doing it. But it meant so much to me because I was reading about Aldo in his books, The Sand County Almanac. He was talking about these types of ethics and values. And he recounted a story that when he was similar to my age, and he had this huge paradigm shift. And he went on to be the establisher of wildlife conservation and management here in Wisconsin in the early 1900s that has grown and been so influential in the way that we see the world when we talk about conservation and biology. And I kind of saw myself as having a paradigm shift and thinking, what does this mean to me? Well, for what it meant to me was before I had no interest in farming. When I graduated high school, I didn't think I was going to be farming. I thought I was going to be as far away as I could, to be honest. Sorry, Dad. I was really eager to get into conservation. I wanted to save endangered species. So I went to UW-Stevens Point to study wildlife ecology, research, and management. And there, like I said, I wanted to really bring back endangered species from the brink of extinction. But the entire time up there, I had, I guess, agriculture in my blood, and I was hearing just a void of talking about wildlife management or conservation on ag lands. So I kind of asked, what's this about? Why aren't we talking about farmland? Like, how much of land, as he was talking about, is devoted to farmland? And they said, well, farmers are too stubborn. Don't worry about it. Your time is best spent there. Well, they didn't know that they were talking to a farmer, so I was too stubborn to accept that information. And so I started to look into some of this stuff on my own outside of class. And another paradigm shift really occurred about, was it 5 years ago now? And I've never told this story with my dad in the room, but so I'm not even sure if I've ever shared it with him, but I was in the Wisconsin Dells on vacation with my girlfriend at the time, and I got a call from my mom saying that the barn had burnt down. And to be honest, at that time, I got it and I was like a brick wall. I felt indifferent to it. I didn't have really a tie. I didn't feel damaged or like anything was lost by me. But I went home. Actually, the next day they told me, just come back tomorrow, close out. So I came back the next day and saw Dad after some of the commotion, cleaning up, finally narrowed him down. And I just wanted to say sorry. And I saw a look in his eyes. At that time, I realized that something was gone from him, and that wasn't a part of me at that point. And I thought maybe there's something to the farm. And this is all tying in at the same time that I was starting to realize that wildlife management was kind of ignoring farming. And I saw an opportunity. And so in farming, in biology, there's a term called serotinous. It's called fire activated. So there's a lot of species of plants that have serotinous seeds that after a fire that they are able to germinate. So that fire was literally a serotinous experience for me in my agricultural dreams. So I went back and went through the motions of school, get my degree, but I eventually came back. And so there's this recurring theme of this fire and eyes. And I really kind of went all in on it. And I guess it's opportunities and challenges, but I've been doing this at the farm since. I graduated in 2015, and I've been back since then. So I started a new thing called Green Fire Farm. It was a subsection of the family farm, and we tried it out. 2015, we wanted to start with, I'll go in there further, but we wanted to start with doing more grass-based and agricultural practices that mimic natural patterns. Green Fire Farm, again with this paradigm of talking about how we speak to each other, the first thing I want to say is Green Fire Farm is on Earth, and then it's in Monticello if we want to get really specific. But I think it's really interesting is one of the first things we say when we introduce ourselves to someone we don't know is we automatically say where we're from, which is usually something completely different. And we can always bring this commonality of being on Earth. We all want the same things, and we're all dependent on the same things. We all need clean water, clean air, food, shelter, and a livable environment. And so let's not put separation for ourselves. But that's just a little picky thing, I guess. So this is a farm from 2015. I took a picture, and you can tell it's from back then because there's a lot of corn. But we're going to be moving into a lot more grass. And if you can really see in the far back past the silos, some black specks in the field. That was from the first year, probably herd about 30 cow-calf pairs. So I'm raising pastured pork, grass-fed beef, chickens, and sheep all out on grass-based systems. I'm not going to talk a ton about the ins and outs of how I'm farming. I have a lot of information on my website. You can come out and visit the farm and have a field day. But I really want to talk about these paradigms. This is this aerial view of the farm. We started out 2015 putting this into grass-based systems. Last year, this. In 2017, everything over on that side. So we're really going at this pretty hard. And it shows the opportunity that when you really start thinking about it and you devote yourself to it, it can happen quickly. We put a lot of carbon back into the soil. The farm total is like 400. about 300 of it, I don't have a term for it, but I really don't want to use the word tillable. Again, using words, being careful of how we speak. When we say that land is tillable, that means that that's like the default thing that we should be doing to it. So I guess we have 300 acres that is not too unfarmable. So I don't know if you guys come up with a term. I've been trying to figure it out for like 18 months.
Row tropical.
No, I don't know. Like it shouldn't have a default thing, I guess. So I don't know. We could think about it. But
that should have been cropped but was.
yes, now let's get a roll off the tongue version. Yeah. So again, being very careful of how these things permeate and create memes in our culture and become unchallenged assumptions that really affect our behavior of how we talk. So, all right, your guys' turn. What are some signs of healthy communities? Now, before you guys answer, I'm using communities now. I don't like the term ecosystems because systems seem so mechanical and there's bits and pieces and they're all separate. But when you instantly start talking about communities, it's automatically integrated, every little part in it as connected. You think about the community of Broadhead. You're not going to think about, well, there's this family, and if you just took them out, it's still the same. I don't know if this is being too picky or what, but I just try to really think about how you can use positive words and words that have underlying stuff that's affected by our cultural paradigms. All right, so enough of me. What are some signs of healthy communities? More talking about land-based communities. Diversity, so how do we measure that? What's that mean?
Diversity of plant communities, mammals,
Okay,
insects, reptiles, amphibians,
okay.
a multi-diverse system or community.
Absolutely, so it's represented by a whole bunch of different classes of life. Okay. And I guess that you could have, you want to be measuring abundance and evenness. You don't want there to be maybe 1,000 different species, but 99% of them are just a handful of those. But you also maybe not want 1,000 species and they're all completely equal or something. It's going to be balancing, so there's a lot of different ways that diversity can be measured, right? What are some other signs?
Water you want to put your face
Okay. So clean water, something, all right. Anything else?
Sharing problems.
Sharing problems? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
No, I think that's your job.
Oh, okay.
I could a little bit.
Sure.
I would say that when there's a problem in one area, it seems like nature is able to come into that area and improve it until it's balanced, I guess, or it moves around to balance it.
Okay, so it's kind of moving towards a homeostasis in a sense, and it's able to heal itself in a way. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
They're tough and resilient. They can bounce back from bad things.
Absolutely. Yeah. That hits on one of the things I have. Yeah.
Something that is going well benefits the others around it.
Yes. So
when the bees are well and having lots of ways of multiplying, then they're benefiting the other crops and plants.
yeah, it's a positive feedback loop. The parts in the community add to the community and make it better instead of taking it down. Anything else?
A culture in the community that probably addresses the human population, that there is an understanding that everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you do to the land impacts my family, your family,
Yeah, because when
vice versa.
you start thinking that, you start living that, and that's gonna.
It kind of goes back to your green fire story.
Yeah, and so some of the other ones that I have is that niches are filled, and if they're not being forced or vacated, so that's one way. Also, nutrients and energy cycling is happening. If those are becoming stagnated, that's a sign of an unhealthy system. But if they're constantly being taken up because niches are being filled by different species, that's a sign of a healthy community. So another one is healthy soil. Everything is based on the soil, literally from the ground up. So if you have healthy soil, that probably has a good chance that you have a healthy community. Again, nutrient and energy cycling, the water cycle, having clean, filtered water, and being utilized. Utilization is a big thing, especially with our ag lands. We want to slow, spread, and sink it. Anytime water is starting to get narrow, it's going to start causing erosion. You want to spread it out, so that's going to start slowing it down as well. And you want to sink it into the ground and be able to use it later, how we were talking, rather than let it go into surface water streams, and you won't be able to use it from an agricultural side of things. Also, lots of habitat, and this is going to play into how you have a lot of diversity. And then communities. Humans, we have very good vision. We can notice if something is vibrant and beautiful. There's something innate that we can pick up on. But obviously being resilient and robust is a sign of it. And happy and fulfilling. That's, again, not something that's maybe only being able to be accessed by humans and felt, but the other beings that are in the land. And maybe the land itself is happy and fulfilling and living stimulating lives. So what are some of the benefits of healthy communities? Absolutely. So it's a lot of the same stuff. I mean, by having signs of healthy community, those are things that are just naturally and intrinsically benefits to us. If we're living in the correct paradigm and viewing it from the correct paradigm, if we're seeing ourselves as isolated and that we might not be able to see the value that those things are providing for us. Whether we or our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all of our deals and decisions. I'm looking at Mark right now. And she has more votes, a longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do. Wendell Berry. Nature has shown that it generally is healthy and has abundance. And how I kind of put this up maybe more bluntly is nature bats last. If we disconnect ourselves from nature, whether that's in agriculture or in other parts of our lives culturally, if we separate ourselves for long enough, nature will always bat last and we will not be making it. So this leads into agriculture, how we can have a holistic mentality to bridge that gap so that nature doesn't have to bat last. We don't even have to play the game. So we want to set up not systems, but operations and relationships with our land where they're holistic and maybe mimicking nature. So instead of turning the wheels for the farm and doing everything for it, putting things in place so that we just have to make minor adjustments, align the wheels rather than going through all the work to turn them. We want to view animals as employees and tools. And if you use employees or tools wrong, you're not going to have much success. And looking at things holistically, you're going to realize that problems that come up in your farming experience are symptomatic and systematic. For example, if you have a disease, treating that with antibiotics every single year eventually might lead to antibiotic resistance. But if you take the root cause and figure out what is maybe your animals have a mineral deficiency or are not getting enough protein or something like that, where that they are maybe more susceptible to an ailment, that is leading to more of a holistic mindset. So we want to avoid band-aids, which are potentially short-sighted and not permanent solutions. One way that we can do this is follow nature's lead. Steve talked about this with how, even in North America, how abundant and fecund North America was and has the potential to be. We are very familiar with the African Serengeti, but it's often referred to as the American Serengeti was just the same, building natural abundance and resilience in the system. So we could follow nature's lead. Nature has done over about infinite millions and millions of experiments with infinite amount of variables over decades, centuries, millennia, eons. And it has figured out and generally come to steady state and abundant communities. So if we look at what nature's doing, we can kind of use that as a role model for what we should be doing. So in our area, I think you were talking about before that one of the more dominant communities that was in this area was the oak savanna. And that's where the herbivores and grasses really started to function very healthily in this area. So we can kind of try to recreate that in our agricultural lands. So it looks a lot like something like this. A lot of grass, some trees, providing some shade, but there's a lot of different dimensions of growth and stuff going on there. The last word in ignorance is the man who says of an animal or plant, what good is it? If the land mechanism as a whole is good, then every part is good, whether we understand it or not. If the biota in the course of eons has built something we like but do not understand, then who but a fool would discard seemingly useless parts? To keep every cog in wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. As Elder Leopold. This is talking about the biodiversity, how I interpret it. When we look at nature, that over, again, so long periods, it has come to these very healthy communities that more or less are very stable over a long time. For us to go in there and to say that we have a better way of doing it or the land should be a different way might really bite us in the back. And I say might very cautiously. It probably will happen. It absolutely is, yes. So what we're doing is we're trying to follow nature's lead on our farm. And so this was back in 2015, April, about this time of the year. We're taking a cornfield in bare ground and putting it into very diverse pasture mix. So this is what it looked like. We had 18 different species, at least, and there was some other contamination, so we had a lot of stuff in there. It was good though. We're fine with it. And it grows up and looks like this. And let me tell you, cattle love it. And I love it when they're out there eating that type of stuff too. So we wanted to go with as diverse as possible to really start to tap into some of those, the intelligent tinkering, not having to understand everything, but just kind of see if it figures it out for itself. So the thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. And now I'm really glad that I followed you because you were talking about how there's this kind of this push against cows and cattle on the landscapes to not be as many. And we're seeing that as a wrong thing. But if cattle are being used, as I was talking about, as tools and employees to increase the integrity, stability, and the beauty of the community, then they are a right thing. So this is one of my favorite mamas on the farm. I don't have a name for her, but I look at her as one of my employees, and I'm the manager. And so her job description, I've never, I guess, communicated this with her, but so maybe I should, but she's been great. One of her jobs, I know, I don't, but
Don't name her. Don't name her.
she maybe has her own name, and I'll try to name her something else, and she'd get mad at me or something. I don't know. So, but her job description, if I'm thinking about it, is she needs to eat grass for me, and by doing that, she builds soil. But some of her other jobs, when I'm looking at as a farmer, I want her to do as much of my work as she can. So I don't want to spread her manure. I don't want to bring feed to her. I don't want to bring water to her. I don't want her to get sick and have to take care of her all the time. I want you to be able to do it all. And I want you to give me a live calf every single year. I want you to live a long life. And I want you to be able to wean that calf. So a lot of things. But if you think about our current paradigm where we isolate ourselves from the rest of things and we very reductionist, we want to do everything for them. So yeah, we'll bring you the feed. And then, now we got to take all your manure, you poop a lot, and you're getting sick. So there's things, if we set up the community as the way that they've showed us in the past that they live this way, they will do a lot of the work for us. So just think about tools. If you only have a hammer, all of your problems are going to look a lot like nails. But if they're not a nail, that's not like a screw's fault that you're using a hammer. That's the person using the hammer. And it's not the hammer's fault either. So it's the person that's using the tool. And so one of the paradigms that I see in agriculture and in general in our culture is that we're very chemical dependent. And so whenever we come up with a problem or we see a problem happening, our first jump is to a solution that's chemical based. But for me, I've talked to you about my relationship with my cows and seeing myself as a manager. And I should add to that, as a manager, I do not want to micromanage and do the work for them, right? I want to put them in the best position for them to do their job that they're hired to do. So I'm looking at that life is the answer to a lot of our solution, or a lot of our problems, and most likely all of our problems. So we need to think about how we're using our tools. And so this goes in, and one of the things I kind of think about, not agriculture-based, like potentially like invasive species we talk about a lot. And communities were based, before we have really disrupted things, were based on disturbance patterns so much. And talked about bison coming on to land grazing and leaving and not coming back for a while. Well, this would happen in all places, whether it's wetlands, grasslands, woodlands. And if you think about our landscape now, with how much biodiversity we have lost, that major herbivores now are deer. When just 10,000 years ago, there would have been 40 species that were herbivores, mammals that were eating stuff from giant ground sloths that have a very much similar effect as like a giraffe in Africa. And then having tons of different mastodons and different bison species, elk, and I could go on and on. All these animals are having an effect on the plant communities and creating disturbance. We've pretty much narrowed the disturbance to whatever we do or whatever the deer do, and we manage the deer based on what we can hunt in a lot of ways. So one of the things I think about is, can we introduce livestock, agricultural species into control and create more disturbance and varied disturbance into some of these landscapes rather than depending on chemicals or mechanical, which, like I said, are not treating the holistic or the holistic cause of the problem. And so things that we could do, there's technologies that allow us to put animals where we want them. Electrified poly wire is what I use on the farm. So my wire and me count as like pseudo wolves, that we're keeping the herd of cattle herded up and we're putting them where we want. We want to keep them moving, not stagnating in certain spots. So wolves are my favorite animal, so it's kind of cool I get to be a wolf. But up here, we only use a single wire for our cattle. But for like pigs, sheep, smaller animals, you want to use multiple. There is technology now that allows us to put multiple strands up very quickly and put animals where we want them to be. You can bring water. This is my pig water that you can put out on pasture. They won't destroy. So we can really put animals wherever we want to put them and get them to have that disturbance, which we can vary by how long we keep them on somewhere. And these are chicken tractors. They're chicken pens that are moved once or twice a day. And that's, again, keeping all these animals living on grass because we believe that grass and pasture-based systems have benefits and keeping them moving. So here are some of my pigs. I planted trees that hopefully grow into an oak savanna eventually on about 8 acres. We planted over just under 1,000 trees last year, and we were grazing pigs and sheep. It's first year doing it. A lot of improvements can be made. I think we're going to make those improvements this year. We'll have to improve again, I'm sure, for 2018, but it's working pretty good. Some more trees. This is a demonstration of the opportunity in our area. In our soils, I had that's apple tree. It was planted last April at this height. That tree tube is 5 feet tall. and that was taken in, the leaves are still in the trees, September. So there was over 5 feet of growth on that apple tree. I didn't do any mulching. Our soils are just still have that residual fertility and are just made. We can grow a lot of vegetation and we could make it perennial. You can see I have pigs in the background, there. So there's some more, and that was not just a single tree. There's many trees that were peeking out already. And this was at the end of the year. It's getting kind of muddy. We know how wet it was last fall, but there's some happy pigs in mud. And eventually those trees are going to grow up and produce a lot of food and forage that I can use for producing my animals. And other than my initial upfront costs, those acorns, I don't have to fertilize with chemicals or spray, and I let the animals do it and turn it into bacon. Only the mountain has lived long enough to listen objectively to the howl of the wolf. Again, Elderly really likes talking about mountains and wolves, and I think this quote really shows how we may think we know what we're talking about, and I sometimes talk like I do, and I don't. Only the mountain and the land lives on a different time frame, and it knows a lot of things that we don't know. Even the trees have seen us come and go in this area, very old, like oak trees. And so one of the paradigms I see that I have an issue with is in our culture, our views of timescales is very based annually and on single generation, our own lifespans. I think it's pretty popular, and a lot of people have heard about like some of the Native American cultures talk about 200 years and like the 7 generation mentality and making decisions as long as and thinking 7 generations out. And we don't see that a lot anymore, or hardly at all. So it's something I've seen. And so Wendell has a good quote. The fertility cycle is a cycle entirely of living creatures passing again and again through birth, growth, maturity, death, and decay. And when I look out, and again, I'm young, I have a lot of life in front of me, hopefully, I've felt really weird about how our culture has a paradigm when it comes to death and decay. If you think about it, it's really a symptom of how we look at our lives when we're living. We separate ourselves into cemeteries and pump ourselves full of preservatives to keep us separated. But a lot of indigenous cultures would think that is insane because we are just energy and nutrients that is in this current form and being cycled. And that translates into how we treat the land. And we're treating it on an annual and very short time basis. But if we start thinking about ourselves in a different relation, we might start thinking about having more perennial systems and thinking long term and how the land base is exactly what we need to be managing for, because whatever is good for the land is good for us. So overall, paradigm shift. Right now, I think that I took this slide from one of my friends, Peter Allen. He's in Wisconsin doing very similar things to me, a similar development. I think he's been in it for about 4 or 5 years now. And he took this and he said that put this together, we're in a civilizational paradigm right now, and we need to move into an ecological paradigm. And so civilizational paradigm sees ourselves as segregated away from the rest of the community, and we need to integrate ourselves into that and integrate our minds and how we behave into that. And moving away from simple solutions and simple problems into complex, and understanding that sometimes it's hard to pinpoint anything. And not that there's linear progressions, but a lot of things are non-linear or something that may have rhyme and reason, but we just are not capable of understanding, or they could be cyclical. Competition, this is something that is very pervasive over our entire global culture now, whether it's through sports, economics, everything. If we think about how we raise our children, what percentage of the games that we play are solely based on competition? As much as we talk about sportsmanship and those type of things, that it's about the health of it, how many of those games are based on competition rather than cooperation and beating another thing or being better than something? it's very interesting to read some of the indigenous cultures and the games that they play and the goals that they have. But I won't get into that. Our civilization paradigm is focused on efficiency, that having the maximum amount of output is a sign of being very efficient with what you got. But ecological paradigm, you'd be more worried about resilience and having stability and security rather than just having everything that you can have and being the most efficient. And this is the most important one. Going from being egocentric and seeing yourself as the world outside of yourself to seeing yourself as ecocentric, as yourself as being immersed into a community. And kincentric is seeing other beings that are living in the landscape as equal. And what's good for the oak trees is good for you. What's good for the soil microbes is good for you. What's good for the deer is good for you. What's good for the wolves, something that we might not think is good for us, is good for us. And design is a blueprint. Moving that to being adaptive design processes. Not having a specific plan and sticking to it no matter what, but going along with the flow and dealing with what nature hands us. So as a demonstration of what paradigm, I'm not just up here talking about this, I thought we got to move towards a utopia. And so I Google searched utopia. This is what I got. Where's the green in there? I think there's some water, but there's no green. This is what our culture's paradigm is. This is what we think we're moving towards. It took me over 5 pages of results to find anything with green. So I just gave up and I found my own utopia. It might be a little romanticized, but this is general, like, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a big contrast there, and there's maybe not, I don't have the words to explain it, but I think we can pick it up. Finally, when it comes back to agriculture with our paradigm, a nation that destroys the soil destroys itself, by FDR. And this one's been heard a lot of times, but it's very true. And I hate to kind of end on like a pessimistic point of view or point, but if we think about what it means if we destroy our soils and we're not protecting them, we can just look in the past of what's happened. Anybody know what this place used to be called? The Fertile Crescent. And what is it now? It's desert. So we went from the Mesopotamia and the empires and how much prosperity that the human civilizations experienced there to what they have now. There's a lot of desertification going on in our agricultural lands here, and because we are so focused on our annual and generational paradigms and time frames, we might not be able to look back hundreds and thousands of years to see examples that have been led by other people. So let's please avoid this. So I have a friend that he kind of reimagined. The bottom is a aerial or a satellite picture of Earth, and the top was he did some Photoshop to talk about if we implemented all the things that Steve and I have been talking about, and regreening the deserts and putting our management skills for cattle as a priority and putting carbon back into the soil. So again, I'll finish with the first quote. The stories we are told shape the way we see the world, which shapes the way we experience the world. Again, that means so much. The way that how we talk to each other, our communities pick up on that, our children pick up on that, our parents pick up on it. Every single thing that we behave and how we act results from the ways that we think and talk and the stories that we tell each other. So I encourage you to think about the ways that we talk. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys.